Well, we're going to celebrate the wins, and this is a good one. On Wednesday, November the 13th, the South Australian Parliament voted on a bill that would have decriminalised prostitution in the state, and it was decisively defeated, 24 votes to 19, and that is no small thing because not long ago when this thing came on the boil, there was a real concern that it would pass easily. The role of ACL supporters in this effort was massive. I want to thank you, but I want to give you a snapshot of how a campaign like this is run and the man-hours involved, the supporter commitment involved, and the finances involved. This included extensive one-on-one lobbying with politicians by our South Australian Director, Christopher Brohier, and our spokeswoman for women, Wendy Francis, and also prostitution survivors that we flew in, and also subject matter experts that we flew in. There was a big email campaign in which thousands of South Australian supporters emailed their MPs to raise their concern. There was an SMS campaign in which supporters received SMSs on their phone with links that they could tap to call their local MP's office and make their voice heard. There was also a proactive phone calling program from our own call centre, ringing South Australian supporters, asking them if they would make their voice heard to their local MP. Most of you said yes. Thank you so much for that, because we press a button, patch you through to their office, and you make your voice heard on the issue. We also had survivors, as I said, and for prostitution and subject matter experts flown in. Why? Well, also for forums with MPs, events to tell their stories and expose the horrors of the prostitution industry. We did robocalls into key electorates to poll voters, and we found that 80% of voters would be less likely to support an MP who supported the bill. So we took that result, and amongst other things, we published it in a full-page ad in the Adelaide Advertiser to raise the alarm with people and MPs. We had numerous media engagements, Christopher Brohier and others again doing great work there. We had a Facebook advertising campaign for marketing where we reached into people who are not on our support list, but we plugged them into the campaign and got them involved, and much, much more. Much goes into that campaign. It relies on supporters like you. Thank you very much for everything that you did. Now what we're going to do is turn into efforts not just to block the decriminalisation, but what we want to do is reform the law. And we want to do this in all states around Australia, not just South Australia. And what we want to do is criminalise the purchase of prostitutes, criminalise the purchase of sex, and liberate trafficked women from the industry. Now, I used to be, as I know some who might be watching this would be, opposed to what is called the so-called Nordic approach to prostitution law reform, in which you criminalise men who buy sex and you effectively decriminalise women who sell it, although it's not always men and women, but usually. And I used to think to myself, well, that doesn't make any sense. That sounds like some feministic or postmodernistic or something. You know, everyone's responsible. But then I realised actually why the model is designed that way, and it makes a lot of sense, and I've come full circle. I'll explain why. It is because Australia is one of the top 20 trafficking destinations in the world, mostly for women from Southeast Asia. And roughly 80% of prostituted women in Adelaide are from the Southeast Asia area. Stories from survivors indicate that many of these women who are lured here under false pretenses or other nefarious things are trafficked. And they tell of one Adelaide establishment, for example, which is far from alone. There's many of these throughout the country, where women are forced to work from 9 a.m. to 11 p.m. every day of the week. They live in the brothel, they never go out, and they cannot speak English. Now, this is the picture of the majority of the prostitution trade in this country. When you think of high-class escorts with rich businessmen who are completely voluntary in what they're doing and are deliberately and actively doing the wrong thing and sort of glorying in it, that is a teeny minority of what's going on in relation to prostitution in this country. And when you realise that, and you realise that there are people who are trafficked and enslaved in our neighbourhoods, and these laws are designed to give them the permission structure and the opportunity to come forward without fear, but also to prevent the demand for the services that they're being called in and being trafficked into supply by criminalising their purchase, you realise that this law makes quite a lot of sense. Sweden was the first country to adopt the so-called Nordic approach. It criminalises the purchase of sex, as I said, and creates easy pathways for trafficked women to exit without fear of prosecution. And the evidence from Swedish police is that traffickers now avoid Sweden as a matter of course because the law's too difficult, and they prefer markets like the Netherlands and Germany, where of course the law is on their side. In Sweden, there are 600 to 1,000 prostituted people in a population of 10 million. 600 to 1,000 in 10 million. Compare that with New South Wales, population of 7.5 million, so 25% less, and yet there are more than 10 times the number of prostituted people in New South Wales, 6,000. Now, New South Wales has a partial decriminalisation model. What a difference. You look at Germany, there are 1.2 million transactions for the purchase of sex every day. A prostitute is bought 1.2 million times in Germany every day, with 400,000 prostituted people. That country is now moving to try and control the trade, which has become out of control. This is harrowing. It is awful stuff. There are trafficked women in our own neighbourhoods, and I'm not sure that we sufficiently realise this. This has been a revelation to me in the last few years. They're enslaved, they're abused day and night, and it's happening among us in our own civilised suburbs. It's real, and the demand, sadly and reprehensibly, is there. This win is great news for South Australia, and now, of course, we want better legislative options right around the country. Let me close with comments by ACL's Christopher Broyer made to the media shortly after this. He says, this is a victory for South Australian women. It's a victory for the courageous prostitution survivors who spoke from the heart against this bill. This is the 13th attempt in 25 years to change prostitution law, with most previous attempts comprising a pimp's protection model. South Australia clearly needs a new approach, namely adopting the internationally successful Nordic model of prostitution law reform. This equality model criminalises the buying of sex and provides real exit strategies for prostituted people. The Nordic model has been adopted in Sweden, Norway, Iceland, Canada, Northern Ireland, France and Ireland, and comes in force in Israel in 2020. The ACL calls on the South Australian Parliament to adopt this model urgently. This is good news. And now we turn to the next phase of it, which is to stop human trafficking here in this country. I look forward to you joining with us when we get into that next phase. Thank you once again. Hey, thank you so much for watching. If you liked what you saw, then make sure to hit the like button. If you want to never miss another video again, make sure to subscribe, or you can right now watch more videos right here. Cheers.